And welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today is another in the Future of Texas podcast series in partnership with Texas 2036, where we explore the decisions shaping our state between now and the bicentennial in 2036. Today's episode is focused on one simple question, but one that is hard to get right. What policies actually work? Not what sounds good, not what gets funded, but what delivers real results and lasts. My first guest is Laura Arnold. She and her husband, John, co-founded Arnold Ventures, a philanthropy that has deployed over $2 billion in solving some of the most persistent problems in American life: drug pricing, criminal justice, education, healthcare affordability, and infrastructure. Laura was born in Puerto Rico, built a career as a corporate lawyer and energy executive, and then made a different move. That the most important thing she could build wasn't a business, but systems that actually worked for people. She's a Houston mother of three, a Giving Pledge signatory, and one of the most consequential voices in evidence-based policy in the country. My second guest is David Leebron, President and CEO of Texas 2036, the nonpartisan policy organization working to shape the decisions that will define this state through its bicentennial. David is one of the great institution builders of his generation. He spent 18 years transforming Rice University, growing it, diversifying it, connecting it to Houston in ways that had never been before, and helping build the ION into a national innovation landmark. Before that, he led Columbia Law School. He's a Houstonian, a husband and father, and now has one job: making sure the Texas of 2036 is worthy of the Texas today. Laura and David, thank you so much for being here. So you two have known each other for quite some time. What does the other person get right that most people miss? And I'll start with you, Laura.
Well, first, I'm really grateful to be here.
Thank
Always
you.
happy to be with my friend David. I think what David and Texas 2036 get right that many people miss is a commitment and fealty to evidence as a guiding force for determining what to work on and what to advocate for and what to commit to in terms of policy change. Texas 2036, which I've had the great pleasure of being a funder of and a part of since its inception by the great Tom Luce, has always had in its moral fiber and in its DNA a commitment to following the evidence and going where the data shows us we need to go in order to help people.
And you, David?
Well, I certainly agree with what Laura had to say there, and we're both trained as lawyers, so we believe in evidence for things. But I think the key is, in some sense, you start with data, and you have to find or obtain the data, and then you have to analyze the data, and then you have to apply the data, and then you have to use data techniques to judge the results. I think what's really impressed me about what Laura has done and what Arnold Ventures has done is, they're focused on impact, right? It is not about feeling good about, the policy in some theoretical sense. It's what's the impact. And there are three aspects of that I think have really made a big difference. One is focus, which is making choices about where you're going to apply your resources and your efforts and your thinking, because no resources are unlimited. We have to make good choices. The second is scale, right? What policy changes can you support that really are going to have an impact at scale? There are different kinds of philanthropy. Some are focused on helping particular individuals. That's not what Laura and Arnold Ventures has done. They've looked for a scale of impact. And the third, I'm not sure exactly what the right word is, but I'll call it longevity. That is not looking for things that are just for this round of decision-making or this round of action, but really have this long-term impact. And as I've watched sort of Arnold Ventures evolve over the years, those seem to me, Laura can correct me, she's not shy about that, but those seem to me sort of three elements that really help set her thinking apart. That is, we're going to focus on the things that matter, we're going to do things that have impact at scale, and we're going to do it for impact that is going to endure over time.
So I want to ask you, Laura, you and your husband, John, have made a deliberate decision to sort of pick hard problems right? And stay with them for years, maybe even decades. What is it about that approach that you believe in so strongly? And what have you seen it accomplish that a different approach couldn't?
We've been at this work probably for around 20 years in some way, shape, or form. As philanthropists, we've navigated a number of sort of different perspectives, and I think we've grown as philanthropists in thinking in trying to understand how we can best add value. I think what we've come to understand, or at least believe for us, is that identifying systemic problems that where we can think of constructive solutions that are nonpartisan and that can be evidence-based is the best way that we can contribute to maximizing opportunity and minimizing injustice, which is what we want to do. So if you take a step back, at least for me, when I think about, all of us in a community share objectives at some level, right? I mean, we all want safe communities. We all want opportunity for our children. We all want, an environment in which we can prosper, in which business can prosper, in which everybody can have a home and everybody can access the American dream, right? I think those are values and objectives that we all share. The question is, what are the barriers that are standing in the way of that development and of that progress? And can we direct government resources, which ultimately are the resources that are going to move the needle in terms of, magnitude? Can we direct government resources toward a more effective and efficient way to address those problems? And so that's what we do. And so I think we believe that that's how you create sustainable change. We believe that that ultimately is how you improve people's lives, is by creating better functioning systems that are, that governments run. And we're one actor that, where we hope that we can create policy solutions. We can offer policy solutions and foster this, discussion of what does and doesn't work, so that we can achieve those goals.
So with that framing in mind of everything that you just explained, how do you decide, how do you pick a policy? How do you decide, this is something we want to work on? What's the thought process, and how do you know that the policy is being implemented well? What is a good policy?
Well, I'm very glad you asked that question, because I have a very, very good example from here in Texas, which is the state that we all love and the state that, that's the subject of this podcast.
Yeah.
What makes a good policy, in my estimation, is a clear identification of the problem and a clear articulation of solutions that are evidence-based, and on the back end, a clear definition of how we measure success. So here in Texas, as David well knows, because he's been so involved, Texas 2036 has been so involved, we have had revolutionary progress in higher ed, and specifically in community colleges and in the area of career technical education. We all recognize that this is a very, very important thing to get right as a state and as a community. We need to provide pipelines of opportunity, of good jobs, of credentials that lead to jobs that have impact on individuals, that we have significant government resources that we have allotted to this effort, and we need to hold institutions accountable for delivering good results. So what that looks like in terms of what the policy evolution was is, from I think 2021, maybe 2023, we have been working on this issue. Texas 2036 has been at the forefront of many of these discussions in figuring out how do we shift the way that we think about community colleges in Texas away from just giving money for sitting in a seat, away from that and toward credentials of value, toward rewarding institutions for producing credentials that translate into income and better conditions for students.
Yeah.
And that has been a process that's culminated on some terrific legislation the last legislative session that we are continuing to work on to try to create these career pathways that align very well with the needs of Texas employers, the economic prospects of our state, and that fill the demand for education for people who need these, who need career pathways.
Yeah.
So we're very proud of that work. And again, David can speak more to it, but that's been that's something that's top of mind. And that to me is an example of a policy of identifying a problem, the problem being the need to improve the pipeline of education to careers, articulating a solution, the solution being focusing relentlessly on data, on credentials of value, on producing the right outcomes, and creating an accountability structure that holds institutions accountable for producing that.
Yeah. David, I want to ask you sort of the same question. What makes policy good policy?
So I think Laura's captured this really, really well, and I've been really grateful to see the focus of Arnold Ventures on community colleges. And I think some people were surprised, given my background. When I came in, one of the first invitations I got was to speak to the Texas Association of Community Colleges, and I was so grateful for that invitation because I'm so passionate about this issue. I've spent my life, academic life, at very different kinds of institutions. They do great things. They are not the institutions that are going to solve the problem of work and opportunity at scale. Going back to this concept of scale, and you start with the data, and you can look at, and you have to be careful about which data you choose, because if you look at Texas and say, what are our high school graduation rates? Texas looks fantastic. It's 90% graduation rates. But then you look at more data, which goes to what Laura's referred to, is are people earning post-secondary credentials? Are they getting the jobs that pay well? And the answer to that question is no. And what is the solution to that? And the solution really is to make sure they have what we both call credentials of value. And that's been a real focus of Texas 2036 work through HB 8 in the 2023 legislative session, and again HB 8, I think, in the 2025 legislative session. Because one of the things that happens, and is particular to our organization, and I think also Arnold Ventures, is you're not done when the legislature passes the policy that you thought was needed. You really have to see how has it been implemented and what are the consequences? Because often what happens is not everybody likes that policy, and they get another bite at the apple when it comes to implementation. And so in the 2025 legislative session, we had credentials of value as the standard and requirement, but then people were trying to kind of dilute what a credential of value meant. And if you dilute what a credential of value means, then you eliminate the incentives and the accountability, and people aren't getting necessarily credentials that will really change. I talk to my Uber drivers now, I talk to my healthcare providers and technicians, really to get a sense of what has changed people's lives. And when you go to a community college and you get certification in the healthcare area or technology, for example, that really changes your life and leads to what we call a family-sustaining wage. And that's really got to be the goal at the end of the day. Our vision of Texas, in a sense, is that it be the best place to live, work, and raise a family. And that requires that people have these incomes that can sustain a family. So really back to your question and reiterating what Laura said, it's about identifying the data that you need to solve problem. Well, first I should say, identifying what the problem is, identifying the data you need. And sometimes after you've identified the problem, you find out we don't have the data yet. So sometimes at Texas 2036, our first step is not to say, here's the policy we need. It's here are the policies we need to get the data we need to decide what the policies we need are. And that, for example, is what we're doing now in childcare. We don't really fully understand what the childcare issues are. So the first is to make sure we get the best data we can out of the state agencies.
So, I mean, both of you are coming at this from, different organizations with, maybe slightly different missions and approaches and everything like that. But how do we make government work better at identifying and implementing these policies? How can we do that from the outside? And I'll start with you, Laura.
Yeah, well, my first suggestion, or I guess policy premise, would be to invest in data. Right.
Yeah.
I think that I think we cannot have an honest discussion about how we're doing if we don't collect the data to evaluate how we're doing. So of course we have to care. We have to care about how we're doing, right?
Sure.
And we have to not overindulge in platitudes and be so ideological or doctrinal that we not want to engage with the data. But but I think fundamental to achieving change is understanding where you are, setting where you want to be, and then evaluating what is going to take to get there. And that, the what is going to take to get there is, reasonable people can disagree. And so there's lots of, there are different policy recommendations on how we can increase whatever it is, whether it's graduation rates or measures of success, et cetera. Our role being, at Arnold Ventures and as a philanthropy, is to be that sounding board of data and analysis so that we can test things and we can be the laboratories of assessment to understand what does and does not move the needle. I think what David mentioned earlier about credentials of value, going back to this concept, the reason that's so important is that the whole point of higher education is for you to be in a better place than you were before you went to whatever it was, community college, or you achieved you took this course or this series of courses, you got this credential. The whole point of you doing this is that your life is going to be better economically. You're going to have more stability, whatever the marker is. If that is not true, what are we doing? Right? I mean, at the most basic level, right?
Yeah.
And that is where data informs the conversation. Because if a certain program is not yielding those results for students, what are we doing? Not only is it a waste of time for the student, it is a waste of resources for the taxpayer. It is a wasted opportunity for us as a community to invest in young people and in adults who are trying to better their circumstances, and that's not what we're about. So the reason data is important is not because we're data nerds, although we are, right? It's because it is a tool to direct the conversation away from things that don't work and toward things that work.
Yeah. David, I want to ask you the same question. How do we get the government at all levels really to identify and implement policies that work?
Yeah, I mean, government and our political systems have some pretty fundamental challenges, I think it's fair to say, which is not to say that they're not populated by people who care about the things that we all care about, which is, the word that plays in some ways the best in Texas is the word opportunity. And that's something I think Texans are proud of and they share, and they want everybody to have opportunity. And the question is, how do we really go and achieve that? And I think part of the challenges is that our legislators, for example, are very busy. They're busy on the sort of governmental front, and then they're also busy on the political front. They have to run elections. Our politics are deeply divided in various ways. And so the question for us at Texas 2036 really is, how can we help? How can we really help? I had one member of the legislature who was from a distinct political point of view say to me, the vast majority of the people who are up here really want to do good. And they don't always have the resources and information to do that. And so we hope what we're doing is playing a kind of third-party role as a resource and a factor in what the legislature and the government generally is able to do. And the way we do that is not just provide the information and expertise, sometimes through testifying, for example, but really to become a trusted, nonpartisan voice. And the trusted is really a very important piece of this. And that's something you don't do instantly. That's happened for us over 3 legislative sessions.
Yeah.
And we've really seen the change from really, as I like to say, in the first legislative session that we were actively involved in, having to pound on the door to get to stand in the back of the room, to in the most recent session, really having people calling us and asking us to help with data, to help with analysis, to help with information, and to be a voice that they trust in terms of not having a partisan element to what we do, not actually having an ideological element unless you believe that data and analysis are ideological, which we don't, And the other thing that we really do stress is accountability. And Laura mentioned this earlier. And it really doesn't matter where. It's accountability for us, accountability for school systems, accountability for administrative systems to implement things, and really to have the data to measure things both before and after we make these decisions. But we really do like to think of ourselves, and I think also Arnold Ventures, this is an additional element to the success of our political and governmental systems, trusted sources of data and analysis.
Well, and I'd add to that, I agree with all of that. I'd add to that both at the federal and the state level, the only people, maybe not the only people, the majority of people who come before legislators are vested interests, right? Or they're special interests. They are there because they want something that relates to their own bottom line and their own pockets. Whether it's an industry association or a union or any number of sort of interest groups that are highly organized and highly well funded. We, and I think Texas 2036 and Arnold Ventures share this role. We represent those who aren't represented, right? We represent not the special interests, but the people who actually want to do the right thing, and the people who are willing to go where the data takes us, regardless of ideology, regardless of partisan identification. And that role is really important because it's a technocratic role at its core, but it's very important because it is a source of objectivity and truth that really should guide policymaking. And as an added benefit, it does bolster the counter arguments for the very, very, very loud voices that are in the ear of legislators all day long and in the pockets of legislators all day long. And so that is in our political system, that is a really important role that I feel that we play very effectively.
I very much agree. I like to say, which really echoes what Laura just said, we have one client, and it is the people of Texas. Now, to achieve our goals, Texas also must be a destination for business. You cannot provide opportunity unless business comes to Texas to provide those jobs and opportunity. But we're really focused on that. I will say, in the process, we partner with a wide range of organizations, business organizations, chambers of commerce, others all across the state of Texas. And I think that's also what makes us very effective. But I think this partnership in some ways between philanthropy and a nonprofit organization, and we're really directly engaged with our legislators, talking to them about what we see as the policy priorities of the state and the best solutions. These are really very effective partnerships in our view, and there's nothing else out there that replicates that. We're not doing the work. Other organizations are doing really great work, but this focus on policy, data-driven policy that will achieve systemic solutions at scale, that's really what we're all about at the end of the day, and what we really need our government to be about at the end of the day.
Yeah, I want to circle back just real briefly. To echo what the representatives told you, that everyone at the Capitol wants to do a good job, wants to help Texans. I've interviewed countless senators and representatives, and that's the sense that I get as well. Whether it doesn't matter what side they come from. Of course, they come at the problem from different angles, but they're all there for the same reason, trying to help Texans.
Yeah, and I think in that process, one of the most important things in our experience is how you communicate to folks. Because if you're sending them signals that you come from a certain ideological perspective or have some other kind of agenda, that's not going to end up with a good output. So we're very sensitive to that, and I think that's part of what makes us effective is to really start with that optimistic assumption about our political leaders and actors, that they are interested in achieving the best policies, and communicate with them in a way that resonates with that. And frankly, different parts of the political spectrum may have different ways about thinking about the problem, but they may all come to a common conclusion about what to do about in the face of data. Most of the things that we work on get passed almost unanimously. And it's not because they're easy things. It's because once you sort of get in that vein of we can show you the data and explain why this achieves the results that you want to achieve, regardless of where you are in that spectrum, you can achieve this kind of unanimity because it's a shared set of goals which revolve around the welfare of the people of Texas.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd also say that the policy challenges before us in Texas and nationally and in every state are enormous and widely varied. Nobody is an expert on all of these things, and so the people that you interview, whether they're a state senator or state rep or somebody in the administration, they can't possibly be an expert in every single thing.
Yeah.
And so what are they going to do? They need to resort to experts. Who is that expert? The easiest expert is the industry expert, right? Because that's the loudest, right? That's the squeaky wheel. That's the one who is going to, be more present in that person's office. But that's not necessarily, or I would argue, that's never the right expert, or certainly never the only one that you should listen to. But there isn't a coalition of forces on the other side that can take a more macro view and talk about systems and talk about whatever the policy intervention is in the context of the broader problem and in a context that's more dispassionate. And so that is what we do. That is what we think is critical in order for good policymaking, because that then empowers that state senator, that rep, to do the right thing. Because if she doesn't have that data, and if she doesn't have that backing, and that sort of policy shop behind her, she can't do it. She doesn't have the resources, right? I mean, this is, these are part-time legislators. This is, once every 2 years. It's just not conducive to being a subject matter expert on everything.
Yeah. So, Laura, this week y'all announced a $15.3 million partnership with San Jacinto College in Houston, and it's built around a model that I think is probably all too rare in public policy, and that it actually works. It works well, perhaps every time, if I'm not mistaken. And I want you to sort of fill in the gaps here. What is that policy? What is it that makes it work?
Well, as we were speaking before, we were talking before about higher education, about community colleges, about the need for policies to be targeted away from things that don't produce good outcomes for students and toward things that do produce good outcomes for students. So that was the sort of the general systemic problem that we're trying to address in this regard is community college completion and success. The numbers are not where we need them to be in Texas or anywhere else in terms of community college completion. We know that community colleges serve, to David's earlier point, a very, very important role in career preparation for a very, very significant portion of the workforce. So we're very concerned and interested in what does and does not work in community college completion. In around 2015, I believe, a program called CUNY ASAP, which was out of the City University of New York, that focused on this exact problem, on completion of community colleges in the New York area in that point, was tested by MDRC, was shown to demonstrate incredible results. There was a phenomenal success in improving completion rates for community college students. We became very interested in that program. We funded a number of different replications of that because, fine, it worked once. That's great. It works at CUNY. It was very important to us to understand, well, does it work at scale? Does it work in more than one campus? Does it work with different types of students, or is it only one type of student? Is it something that's specific to New York, or is it translatable to other geographies? So we have, for the last probably around 10 years, evaluated CUNY ASAP in different contexts to try to understand whether or not those same results can be replicated, scaled, in different contexts. And the short answer is yes, as you noted, they are. They are scaled in many, many different contexts, even in some four-year institutions. So the fundamental elements of the CUNY ASAP model are student supports. They're not anything that would be surprising to you. There's not some magical thing. It's a lot of support It is, it is coaching. It is creating an infrastructure for individuals who need a little bit more, a little bit more support during those years, and who need support in encountering problems that may arise in the course of their education, so they can stay in school and remain committed to their education. So we have, through the years, for the last 10 years, funded a number of research projects trying to, replicate and sort of, test different variations of this program. We've invested in a number of expansions in North Carolina, and very happily now are investing in San Jacinto Community College, so that we can test and bring to Texas this program that has achieved really impactful results. And that's in the context of a lot of our work that we're collaborating with David on to improve outcomes in community colleges and career technical education in the state.
Yeah. I want to ask you, Arnold Ventures is sort of at the forefront of so many things, building things faster, doing things smarter, all that from, criminal justice, healthcare affordability, energy infrastructure, housing, all of that stuff. Where is that work going as you see it now, and why does it matter so much right now?
Oh, it's going lots of places. It's going great places because there is so much to do.
As a Texan, that's great to hear.
That's right. Texas, we have so much to be proud of in Texas in terms of thought leadership, in terms of innovation. We all know and appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit of our state, the leadership in our state, certainly in issues of energy infrastructure, housing, permitting, all of the elements and basic issues that are prerequisites for prosperity of a state are issues that, while not necessarily perfect, are certainly on the radar of legislators and of thought leaders in Texas. And, in many of those areas, Texas is absolutely a leader. Certainly in permitting, we have a very fulsome permitting portfolio at the federal level. We are trying very hard to get the federal government to pass legislation to allow things to get built faster, more effectively, to allow to give certainty to businesses so that we can create the infrastructure that this country needs to prosper. At a micro level, macro level here in Texas, we're actually we are a model for many of the things that go well in terms of allowing transmission, fostering a fulsome electricity grid, fostering all of those infrastructure elements that are necessary for economic prosperity. Housing is we're a thought leader on housing. We are an absolute legislative leader on housing. Cities like Houston, Austin, where you live, are absolutely leaders in thinking through, Dallas also, in thinking through how can we generate a higher inventory of affordable housing? How can we destroy the barriers to providing affordable housing in urban areas for growing communities? So there's a lot to be optimistic about, a lot of work to do for sure, but certainly in Texas there's a lot to be optimistic about on the infrastructure front. You mentioned criminal justice as well. I mean, this is an area where we're very active nationwide. In Texas, there are lots of reasons to be very optimistic about the potential to increase clearance rates. So lower the amount of uncertainty that is sort of surrounding the criminal justice system. Have very, very constructive conversations about public safety. Lower the amount of unnecessary incarcerations while increasing the amount of incarcerations of people who need to be incarcerated. There's tons and tons of work being done that we're very, very optimistic about. That is, again, data-driven and ultimately is both fiscally responsible and civically responsible.
Yeah. So in the little time that we have left, I want to talk about, really focus on the future of Texas, 2036, the bicentennial. And I want to kind of bring children into this as well, because I think all three of us are parents here. And, what is the future of Texas if not the children, right? Mm-hmm. I think that you, Laura, you're raising your kids here in Houston. As you focus on national and state initiatives, how does that affect how you think about the work that you're doing? You're thinking about your children and the work. Does that inform how you approach these problems? And what is the Texas of 2036 that you want for them?
Well, absolutely. The reason I do this work is that I want to leave my country, my state, my community in a better position than how I found it for my children, for all our children. So certainly everything that we do at Arnold Ventures, and I think everything that we do as parents is for that, right? Is to create better circumstances for our children. I think when I think about what I aspire to accomplish as a community and as a state in 2036, I do want to move the needle on opportunity. I do want to move the needle on safety and on creating an environment that fosters opportunity, and where people have civil discourse, where where we have minimized injustice, where we have created the opportunity for prosperity, and where government serves a support purpose and isn't a hindrance. And I think that we are well underway to do all of those things. I think we at Arnold Ventures, I can't speak for David, but we are very optimistic about our policy priorities. We believe that focusing on evidence and nonpartisan, bipartisan activities will be the key to unleashing all of the success that is to come. So we couldn't be more excited.
Yeah. And David, you're a dad. Your children grew up in Houston while you were building Rice. I don't think you built it with your own two hands. But
I don't know. I laid a few of those bricks.
Yeah, I'm sure. Maybe
that big bubble thing. Yeah, I think that was the ion.
Yeah, what did the ion? So, what did raising them here teach you about Texas? Like, what does Texas get right? From your perspective as a father. And again, same question: what is Texas 2036? Not the organization, the state, and the year. What does that look like for the best future for your children and their children?
Well, Texas is a remarkable state. And Houston's a remarkable city. It's an incredibly diverse state and city. Our children have particular opportunities, but not all children have those opportunities. And again, what I see here is this openness of creating opportunity for everyone. And I think that's what Arnold Ventures in many ways is focused on, and that's what we're focused on at Texas 2036. How do we build a great state for the future? 2036 is now only 10 years away, and we remain focused on getting done what we can in that time period. But we're here for the long haul. We've seen what we've been able to achieve working with partners like Arnold Ventures and the Greater Houston Partnership and others, but also working closely with state legislators and others. And that makes us optimistic about this commitment to the welfare of all of the people of Texas. And how do we do that through data-driven good policy at the end of the day? And what we've observed over our engagement for the last, in some ways, 10 years, but very active for the last 3 years, is we have a government that's responsive to that, that's responsive to both the goals of being the best place to live, work, and raise a family, and being responsive to this notion of opportunity for everyone in the state. That's what's going to build a great state. The thing that's really true is we have to anticipate the issues before they arrive. If we wait until there's a problem, bigger problem, we're not going to be able to solve that problem in the way we can solve it if we anticipate it. And if I look at the work of Arnold Ventures and the work of Texas 2036, I think that's what we're also characterized by, not just wanting to do things for the future, but wanting to understand the challenges of that future before they arrive. And I think that's what we're united on achieving. And I think we're both very optimistic about that.
So, Laura, I want to give you the opportunity, as we have maybe a minute or two left here, to have any sort of final thoughts. If philanthropy, policy, research, public institutions, all that stuff is working better together by 2036, what does that Texas look like? Any final thoughts?
If everything is working as it should, we will have much fewer areas of controversy. we'll have much more, we will have gravitated toward an environment of civil discourse relating to evidence, and we'll have a commitment to doing the things that the evidence tells us we should do and not doing the things that evidence tells us we shouldn't do.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, Laura and David, thank you so much to both of you for being here. What we've talked about today isn't abstract. It's about whether Texas can build systems that actually work for millions of people, whether we move from good intentions to real outcomes, and whether this state leads not just in growth, but in policies that deliver. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, David, and thanks to everyone listening. We'll see you next time.